Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to Evolving Consciousness. In today's video, we are going to discuss about this global phenomena which has been unleashed by the current leader of our country, a true yogi in every sense. Mr. Narendra Modi was a person who was instrumental in launching the world's International Yoga Day. And today's video is my humble attempt in sort of unraveling what yoga essentially means. And my focus of today's video is going to be mostly on what yoga is not, because we can talk about yoga and yoga in unlimited videos, because it's an institution in itself, and the kind of content available, the kind of knowledge which is available in the yogic culture is something which can be considered, it cannot be collated in volumes of encyclopedias together. And today's video is sort of to bring about awareness as to what true yoga means. Because nowadays, unfortunately, most of us, the only understanding of yoga and yoga is limited or confined to bending postures at the concoctions of the body we can make. The amount you can bend your body in different directions and different angles, that is the only understanding of yoga which a modern day person has or a layman has. But is yoga only limited to the physical postures, the different theatrical postures or the different ways of bending? Is that yoga? Or is yoga something very deep and eternally profound? If you look at the very word yoga, what does this mean? In Sanskrit, the word yoga essentially means union. Now, what do you mean by union? So what? Union means what? Union with what? Your natural next question would be union with what? Now, this is a huge concept in itself. It boils down, there are different parts of yoga, and we'll come to that. But at the root of it, it means union. Union with the cosmic consciousness, union with our own self, union with any activity which you are engaged in. Now, to give you a very simple rudimentary example, suppose you are engaged in some intellectual pursuit, or maybe you are engaged in some intellectually challenging assignment, and you are engrossed to such a degree that you lose consciousness of time and space. I would like to narrate an example of a person, a real life incident of a person who probably everybody knows. His name is Albert Einstein. So once what happened, Albert Einstein was consumed in his work, his body of work, and his servant attends him and he just gives him a smiling gesture and he tells the servant, you can keep the lunch over here. And after a couple of minutes, as per Albert Einstein's understanding, he sees the servant coming back again. Now he gets a little agitated, Einstein gets agitated, and he says, why are you coming back again? I just told you I'll have the lunch. Then the servant looks quite amazed and sort of awestruck. He says, sir, it's been 24 hours. It's already been 24 hours and you still haven't had the lunch. And Albert Einstein is completely taken aback and he suddenly realizes that he didn't notice that 24 hours had passed out and he was so much consumed. He was heavily occupied with his body of work that he lost complete awareness of time and space. This is what is called as yoga. The flow state which modern day psychologists talk about, the optimal state of optimal performance, that is yoga. But we have a very a very fragile understanding of what yoga is. Yoga is absolute union with the cosmic consciousness. Now, when I say cosmic consciousness, this is a very higher level of state. But yoga can be with your work. Yoga can be with any activity you're pursuing. So yoga is not something which you do once in a year. Yoga is essentially a lifestyle choice the way you function, the way you think, the way you conduct yourself with every minute of the day. That is essentially yoga. And a person who is successfully able to conduct himself in a day-to-day basis as per the principles of yoga, that person qualifies to be called a yogi. Now, Lord Krishna talked about this in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in excruciating detail. Essentially, there are 4 schools of yoga. Number 1 is Karma Yoga, number 2 is Bhakti Yoga, number 3 is Raja Yoga, and number 4 is Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is the yoga of work, wherein you essentially are acting out of the consciousness of just doing for the sake of the work without having any heavy attachments to the results of it. And Bhakti Yoga is essentially bringing up this concept of devotion and surrender to some higher power, to some cosmic intelligence with an absolute sense of reverence. Raja Yoga is basically the yoga of meditation, which talks about the concept of oneness through the different principles of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, many might not know that the Patanjali Yoga Sutras are the basic premise of Patanjali is heavily focused on the branch of Raj Yoga. So, Raj Yoga, the path of meditation, is basically the culmination of what Patanjali suggests in his Ashtanga Yoga, wherein we have 8 limbs as per Sage Patanjali, the yamas, the niyamas, the pranayam, the pratyahar, the dharana, the samadhi. There are 8 limbs and they are topics in itself. So these 8 limbs, which most of us probably have heard of, we probably would have heard of Patanjali because of a lot of media publications and media publicity on the concept of yoga. But that is only one school, that is only confined to the Raj Yoga. But many are not aware of the different schools of yoga. And the only understanding of yoga we have is good for the body and mind. But yoga is something which is beyond all these limited conceptions. Now, funnily enough, most of us don't even know about this, that Lord Krishna, one of the names of Lord Krishna is Yogeshwar. He is one of those powerful eternal yogis who understood, and not only understood, not only spoke about yoga, but he was someone who lived by the principles of yoga in his entire life. Most of us, unfortunately, are only exposed to the playful nature of Lord Krishna or the entertaining side of Lord Krishna. And the unfortunate part is, most of us even justify our dirty habits of flirting and doing things which we shouldn't do. Our conscience knows that we shouldn't do, but we still do that, and we justify saying that Lord Krishna also indulged in these things. But I want to ask you a question, or ask anyone with this mindset a very humble question. Lord Krishna was able to lift the Govardhan Parvat in his pinky finger. Can you and me do that? Lord Krishna was able to narrate the holy Bhagavad Gita, which is sort of the highest level of spiritual knowledge available out there, with absolute mastery level eloquence. Can you and me do that? And let's understand where the Bhagavad Gita was narrated. It was narrated amidst a condition of war, amidst a battlefield. Forget about thinking about spirituality. The only thing an average person can think about in a war zone is survival. But Lord Krishna talks about Bhagavad Gita in a war field. Can you and me even contemplate or even think of doing that? No, right? Now, the reason I brought this up is it's very convenient. Most of us want to cherry pick certain sections of our scriptures and use it as per their own convenience. But what we fail to understand is that we need to study the scriptures from a holistic standpoint rather than just cherry pick certain things to justify our not so good habits, and understand the nature, the character of their personality. Lord Krishna was an extremely disciplined person, though he portrayed himself as a playful, a chilled out personality. but he knew the importance of discipline in his life. Many would not know that Lord Krishna had a great routine of getting up in the morning. He used to do his kriyas and meditations, and he was extremely punctual and disciplined in his conduct. And that is the reason why he was called such an epitome of perfection. Because it was not easy for Lord Krishna to lose his equanimity. Even if you want to understand the ultimate purpose of yoga, there is a beautiful quote by the Bhagavad Gita which sort of epitomizes, which sort of beautifully captures the goal of yoga. It says, Bhagavad Gita says, yoga is journey of the self, through the self, to the self. I want to repeat that because it will take a little bit of understanding and a little bit of attention to my words to fully be able to nurture it, or fully be able to digest what I just said. Yoga is the journey of the self, through the self, to the self. There is nothing else which we are aiming at. Essentially, yoga is a system designed by ancient rishis and our scriptures so that we can meet ourselves, so that we can connect with our true essence. If you look at any spiritual practice or any spiritual thought process, it's all culminating or boiling down to establishing the lost relationship which we have with ourselves. The identity chaos which we have created with ourselves, the root cause of all human suffering, is because of the identity crisis. We essentially have lost touch with our reality. And yoga is essentially a process to sort of undo that, undo those layers of conditioning so that we can connect ourselves and better integrate these faculties of mind, body and intellect, which are sort of not our owners, but we are supposed to be owning them and using them in such a way that they serve us. Unfortunately, these faculties are not serving us. Instead, we are serving to their chaotic needs and demands. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of us are addicted to certain habits. Most of us are dopamine addicts. We cannot be, even without a day, without scrolling in social media. Now, there's a recent study which says that addiction is not all about drugs and smoking. Addiction can be very subtle. Addiction can be of social media. Addiction can be of mindless entertainment. And research has found out that the number one reason for these addictive tendencies is a dopamine imbalance in the brain. Now, this video is not about the benefits of yoga. There are countless researches and studies which substantiate what yoga can bring to the table. But essentially, I am bringing about this focus to the point that yoga is not only about exercising or having a certain disciplined routine in life, and we are only confining that yogic practice to a certain point in the day. But yoga is essentially a way of life. A person can practice yoga 24/7. Now, this is not something easy. This is something which takes years of practice. But this should be a final goal or a final destination. The only understanding of yoga is it's good for the body and mind. But what we fail to understand and acknowledge is yoga is not only good for the body and mind, but it is also good for every second of our day. When it becomes a way of life, then we become a true yogi. Then we are not easily dismantled by the challenges in life. We don't become absolutely excited when something great happens. And we don't feel remorse or sad when something catastrophic happens. This is the condition of Sthita Prajna, a person with equanimity, which Lord Krishna talked about in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And if you look at Gita, right, if somebody has read the Gita once completely, he will realize that Gita is all about yoga. There are different schools of yoga, there are different ways of approaching this subject of yoga. But Lord Krishna says that whichever path you take, whichever path is more resonating with your nature, with your own emotional disposition, because everyone has a different temperament. And as per the different temperament, Lord Krishna is being so compassionate. He does not sort of push someone to a certain school of thought. He has given you a platter. He has given you a different choices through which one can choose to reach the same destination. Now, there can be 4 different paths to reach the same destination, but the important point is that we always need to be careful and mindful and aware of the destination. Now, let's say that I book a Ola or a Uber, and I book a Ola and a Uber, and I don't know where I need to go. Do you think that a trip makes sense? No, right? So essentially, most of us, probably 90 to 95% of the population are sort of approaching yoga through this premise. They know we need to do yoga, but very few people have the understanding of the final destination. The final destination of yoga is not good health or good mental condition. Those are the byproducts, the natural byproducts of that practice. But the final goal and the final destination is something which is beyond words, is something which is beyond intellectualizing or vocalizing. It is something which can only be experienced. The state which Lord Krishna talks about with such spiritual eloquence in Bhagavad Gita is only a state which can be arrived through these different schools. This video's focus was to build around some understanding and also to negate certain subtle understandings, because I'm not saying that the understanding the world has about yoga currently, majority of the population, is incorrect. I'm only saying that it's limited and we need to expand the horizons of our understanding, and we need to also essentially look at what yoga in its essence is. Because once we become and practice the principles of yoga, no matter which school of thought you resonate most with, results are bound to come. You will automatically feel the starting signs of a yogi. And this is the highest level of perfection a human being can accomplish. Because there are 2 ways of living a human life. Either we can just be like animals, right? Because if you look at animals, the number one difference between an animal and a human being is intellect. Even animals eat, sleep, mate, procreate, and also excrete. But if we want to raise above that animal level of consciousness, we need to develop that intellectual faculty which we human beings are gifted with. Sadly, most of us are behaving like animals. We have no interest or no inquisitiveness towards understanding these higher principles. And we only want to be entertained by useless things. Then it's a kind of catastrophic waste of our human life. Because unless we understand, unless we utilize our human intellect in subtle and pragmatic ways, there is no use of being a human. We human beings will be only reduced to a 2-legged animal unless they use their intellectual faculties. Hope my today's view brought about a lot of perspective on the concept of what true yoga means. And if you haven't read the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it talks about a lot of detail about what true yoga is, and these 4 schools which I talked about, a lot of detail and a lot of chapters. They are culmination of different chapters which is dedicated to each of these schools of thought or disciplines of yoga. Thank you so much for your time on my video. I hope you enjoyed my today's video and a sort of a different, a tangential take on this concept of yoga, which is a beautiful understanding, and this is something which we all Indians need to be extremely proud about. And the fact that we are being led by a true yogi of the current generation, this is in itself a great blessing. And the fact that the whole world looks up to India as the Vishwa Guru is an achievement in itself. Thank you so much for your time. If you really enjoyed the video, don't forget to share this video and also give me your valuable feedback. If you like the genre of content I have been sharing, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to receive any notifications of videos which I have uploaded. Thank you so much, and I'll meet you in the next video. Bye.